Hey everyone, this is Mavaddat here. This is my third time recording this video. I am responding to a video that Veritas posted asking 5 questions of atheists, and I thought it was really interesting, so I decided to answer. If you haven't seen the video, you should probably check it out just to see what the questions are, or you can look at my video description to see the questions. I've summarized them there. The first question is, why is there something rather than nothing? This is a question that's very often put to atheists, and it's a hard one for me to answer because I'm not exactly sure what the question means. What is it getting at? For example, if you look at the word why, what kind of explanation is that searching for? Is it a physical explanation? What are the physical reasons why there's something rather than nothing? Or is it an intentional why? What purpose is there for there being something rather than nothing? If it's the latter, if the why is looking for some kind of intention, then we're really begging the question of whether there is some ultimate intention. That would need to be demonstrated. Otherwise, the question is loaded. If it's a physical why, what's the physical reason? We actually have some good idea of why there is actually something rather than nothing. The professor of theoretical physics, Dr. Alan Guth, actually gives an explanation to this, which is that in a false vacuum, you can look that up on Wikipedia, there is possible for particles and antiparticles, matter and antimatter, to emerge spontaneously from nothing. This actually, we actually observe this happening on the event horizon of black holes. And what this means is that in a universe, if you like, in which there is nothing physically, there actually could spontaneously emerge something. And antimatter has a peculiar property of disappearing or clumping together and not being found. Physicists are kind of baffled at this. They're not quite sure why. Some think that the antimatter is sucked back into the black hole. Anyway, the point is just that if you add up all the energy in the universe, it actually adds to 0. So energy, which is convertible to matter, can actually come from nothing. But I mean, maybe a more succinct answer to this question is that if there was nothing, we wouldn't be here to answer the question, which is known as the anthropic principle, the weak anthropic principle. But that doesn't really answer the question. I think that just gives the conditions for the possibility of answering the question. The second question is, what evidence, if any, do you find most persuasive for theism, for a God? Personally, I don't think that there's evidence necessarily that's persuasive for God. I think that there are more practical considerations, I guess, that are persuasive for believing in God. For example, if you believe in a God, it makes it a lot easier to motivate moral behavior. It requires less intellectual rigor. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just that it's almost a kind of shortcut for reasoning out why you should be good. And the reason is just that if you're not good, if you don't live your life according to your moral convictions, you will be punished. I mean, plain and simple. And you can count on that. Without that simple answer, you really have to do a lot of intellectual footwork, which is the whole field of ethics in philosophy. So that's really the thing that I find persuasive, is just that practical consideration of motivating morality. If not for myself, for other people, like if I can tell other people, for example, people who say, why should we care about the environment? And I'll say, well, because if you don't care for the environment, God will punish you. I mean, you may not be around to feel the effects of your negligence, but God will make sure that you feel it in the next life. That could be motivating for someone. Whereas, you know, secular reasons might not be motivating for a selfish person. The third question is, how do you reconcile your atheism with any ultimate meaning in life? And the answer that I have to this is that I reconcile my atheism the same way that theists reconcile their theism, and that is this is really the answer that Sartre gives, Jean-Paul Sartre, the French philosopher, and he says that we actually impose our own meaning onto our lives. Both theists and atheists do this, mind you. The way that theists do it is that they choose to submit to what they perceive to be the will of an external deity, and they choose to impose the purpose that that deity has deigned for their lives onto their own lives. What the atheist does is he or she imposes his or her own meaning as a result of his or her own ethical convictions onto his or her own life. And this is really the same thing that the theist is doing. It's just that I think the theists have a hard time realizing that they are imposing their own value judgments on their life, because ultimately, when it comes down to it, the theist chooses his or her own religion hopefully based on their moral convictions. And if they don't, then they're basically submitting to an arbitrary authority, for example, that they were born into. And those aren't moral reasons anyway, so they're not really giving their life much meaning, substantive meaning, I would argue. So anyway, my answer to that question is that I impose my own meaning on my life, which personally for myself is to leave the world better than I've found it, help people improve their way of life, lessen poverty in the world, make the world a more beautiful place. I mean, it sounds cheesy, but really that's the aesthetic consideration that goes into my moral judgments. So yeah, the fourth question is, were you raised in a religious environment, and how did that affect your atheism? I was actually raised in a very religious environment. I was raised a Baha'i, which is actually a relatively progressive small religious community, and the way that has influenced my atheism is that, well, one, it allows me to sympathize with religious people a lot more, because I understand why they feel so connected with their religion, and two, it allows me to see, well, because of the religion that I was raised in is actually it's hard to see the ways in which it is dysfunctional and detrimental. So it's really my being raised in that religious tradition has motivated me to really try hard to show people why religion is detrimental, despite the fact that it does have beautiful aspects to it. The fifth question is, what is the end-all goal of atheism activism on YouTube? And I really can't answer for all atheists on YouTube, but I can answer for myself. And the end-all goal for myself is to free people from the need for superstitious metaphysical answers to life's most pressing questions. And what I mean by that is basically I want to provide people with intellectually satisfying answers to the questions that they have. Why should they be good? What is the source of truth? How should we live in this world together? These questions have been traditionally answered by religion, but when religion answers the questions, it does so in a dogmatic, metaphysical way, which perpetuates argument, because these metaphysical doctrines can never be proved, and so two believers can't really have a dialogue because they are ultimately arguing competing metaphysical claims that they can't provide evidence for. It's ultimately based on their faith. So anyway, my end goal is that I would like to provide people freedom from their need for religion. I don't want to see religion eradicated. I just think that it would be nice if people didn't need religion. There was a qualification on this last question, which is, why are you sitting behind your computer trying to convince